It is lesson 2, part 3. So we're going to carry on. We've created our model class. So now I want to go back to our categories controller. And what we want to do is use our model to create some categories in memory. And then we want to pass those categories to our view. So actually, just before we do this, I'm going to go back to my categories index, and I'm going to comment out our 3 li tags. So we're going to be replacing these with data that comes from the controller. So the easy way to do this is just at star. And I'm just going to move. So I've commented out my list. Visual Studio turns it green. So I've still got my opening and closing UL tags, but there's nothing inside the list. There's also this little comment button on the toolbar where I could just highlight a block of code and either uncomment, recomment. So put the at star at the top of the first li and the star at after your last li. So that kind of blanks out our page. When you click categories now, our page is empty. So we're going to replace this hard-coded list with some dynamic data that we can generate using our category model that we created in the last part of class. So in our controller, we're going to use our model to generate some data. And then when we load the view, we're going to pass the data to the view. And then in the view, we're going to use some new code to receive and display that. So we're kind of going to follow this whole MVC pattern. Request comes to the controller. Controller uses the model to generate data. The model sends back data. And the controller will load the view, but it will also pass that data to the view so that people can see it in the browser. So I'm going to go back to my categories controller. And we're going to use the category model to generate a list of 10 mock category objects. So we're going to make a list, and we'll use a loop to create 10 categories. So I'm going to create a variable called categories. And this variable will be a list using our category model. So we're going to use this model. We're going to call it 10 times to create a list of 10 categories. In a few weeks, we'll replace this code. We're going to query the database instead. But we're not working with the database today, so our list is just going to be generated in memory. Now notice Visual Studio complains about this, doesn't like this. We get a red underline under category. And it says, type or namespace could not be found. So how come? Well, our controller, if you notice on line 7, our controller is in the namespace positivepets.controllers. Because we created this file, lives here inside the controllers folder. But our category model, it's not in the same folder. If I open up my category model, notice the namespace, it's in the model's namespace. So the model is not visible inside the controller. So there's a simple fix for this error. If I put my mouse over the word category that's underlined in red, I get this little pop-up and it says show potential fixes. I have this little drop down here with a yellow icon, little yellow and red icon. If I click it, it suggests if we add this line of code that says using positivepets.models, if we make a reference to the models, this error should go away. So if I just double click it, Visual Studio adds the code on line 2, And notice now category, it turns blue. That red underline disappears. So in order for the controller to see the model, we need to make this reference. So this line now creates an empty list. We're going to use a loop actually, whoops, I'm going to loop, sorry, from 1 to 10. So each time we loop around, we're going to create a new category and put it in our list. So we're going to add a new category. Our category ID will be equal to our counter. So the first one will be 1, second will be 2, etc. And the name, we'll call it category. So this loop is going to generate 10 categories. Each one will be called category and then the next number in the sequence. And as we're creating them, we're adding them to this list. And this process is going to happen 10 times. So we're not reading data from the database. We're just using our model to create some data in memory every time the index method is called. So now when we load the view, we're going to send in our data here. So I'm going to modify my return statement. So we load the index view, but we're also saying, here's a bunch of data we want you to display. Now, if we go and refresh our page right now, we're still not going to see anything. So we've done 2/3 of the work. We've built the model. We've created the logic in the controller method to create a list and then add 10 categories to the list. And then we're going to include that list. We're going to send it off to our view. So we've done most of the work, but not quite all the work. So I'll leave this code up here. So I've added this block here that's highlighted in blue. Make a new list of categories. Use a loop to generate 10 category objects. And then send that list to our HTML view so we can show it in the browser. So our final step for today is to modify the categories index view. We need to tell it to receive this list, and then we're going to need a loop to display the items. So before, where our page said category 1, 2, 3, that list is now going to go from 1 to 10. That's the last file we need to change. I'm going to go back to my categories index. I'm going to add a line at the top. We're going to declare a model. So we're going to tell the view what kind of data it's going to receive from the controller. So we're going to get a list of categories. And ASP.NET's got this kind of weird, strange object to represent a list. I'm going to use the keyword IEnumerable. And Visual Studio tells me what it is. Exposes an enumerator which supports iteration over a collection. So this basically just means a list that we can loop through. So what kind of data are we passing in? So we are passing in, oh, I spelled it wrong. Sorry, that's why. Enumer. Sorry about that. Oops, I spelled it wrong. Sorry. So here's our model. Sorry, some bad typing, bad spelling. So this line means this page is expecting from the controller, it's expecting to get a list of categories. And now we can use a simple loop. We can loop through our model. And we can now display the category names. So this should loop 10 times. And display the category names. We're going to get this to work, and then we're going to put our links back. So how does this work? Go back. So we've got our 10 categories showing up. But I can't click on any of them. So we've removed that functionality. So now I'm going to wrap these category names back in HTML anchor tags. So we're putting back our ASP action and our ASP controller, as well as the category parameter, which will be our category name. I'll just display inside. So this will put our links back, but now we should have 10 links instead of the 3 that we had hard-coded in the first part of class. So now I've got 10 links. I can click any one of them. It'll take me to the browse method, the browse page. So we've recreated the functionality, but now our data is coming from our controller and our model and being passed into the view. So this is working as we want it to. So our model, we're almost always going to have a model in our views. The model will determine what kind of data each view is working with. And each view can only have one model. We can't use multiple models in the same view. So this is all the coding that I wanted to review today. I'm going to upload my changes to GitHub. Next week, we're going to do some more work looking at customizing views and some of the syntax that's available to us in ASP.NET MVC views. And I'll just go over again what you need to do for next week. So I've got a few changes here. So lesson 2, part 3, display 10 mock categories using a model. So I'm going to push my changes up to GitHub. So that's all the code changes we need to do for this week. So what is on your checklist? 3 items by next Wednesday. So the week 2 quiz, which will be in the week 3 folder, that will open at 2 p.m. today, due at 5 o'clock. I will upload the lesson videos for today. They'll be up in a couple hours. So make sure you've set up your Positive Pet store and you've gone through the coding exercises that we've done in class. There is a discussion question for you today. This is graded. 2 simple questions. What was the most useful thing from today's lesson? And what is something you still want to learn based on what we've covered in the first 2 classes? Okay, so you have until 5 o'clock next week. And then your final is submitting your project idea on the project website. And then submitting your document. Kathleen, you can find it. Just go to my main GitHub page. The link is on Blackboard. So if you just go here, to my main GitHub page, it should be the first item there. Sorry, if you just go to repositories, it's right here. I may have just misspelled. I may have put a typo in the link I put in the chat. So it should be there. I know a few people, I think Kathleen and Colton mentioned you had an issue with GitHub. I do have some time that I could help you sort that out. Does anybody have any questions, anything we should look at in the work we've done so far today? Okay, that's great, Colton. What did you have to do to fix it? Gio, excellent question. I'm just going to... you're pushing the wrong button. Okay, so Gio asked a really good question. What if we change this? So let's say this says categories. Instead, is this still going to work? Well, let's try it out. So now when I click, notice the browse page doesn't load. And this is where our debug, so why doesn't it load? Notice I click and I just stay here. This is where using the Runtime Debugger is actually useful, right? So our application doesn't seem to be working. We don't get an error, but it's not giving us the result we want. Well, let's look at why. If I go back to my categories controller and under browse, I can click over here in the gray bar and put in a breakpoint. Now this is where we can use the debugger. So far we've been starting our server without debugging, but if I want to try my debugger, this time I can click Start Debugging. So now we can watch the code execute and try to figure it out. So I'm going to click on Categories. I'm going to click Category 4. And now my debugger's active. If I put my mouse over, it tells me, hey, the category value is null. And I can step through my code one line at a time. You got it, Jordan, right? So if category is null, and I can even see it down here, right? It evaluates to null. I hit F11, and now I've got this if statement on line 31. If category is equal to null, what happens? redirect back to index. And then this stuff gets skipped, so it never loads the browse view. So I hit F11, it brings me back here. And that's because, so we know our category parameter is null because I modified it as you said. If I put it back so that the word here, the ASP root value, it now matches exactly the name of my parameter, I'll try it with the debugger again. So I'm going to run it again, which restarts my server. I'll click categories. I'll try category 4 again. Now my category is category 4. It checks, is it null? No. So it skips over the redirect, puts the value in the view bag, and now it loads the view. Our page is working. So that was the short answer to you is yes, it will break, right? Our ASP root value, it has to exactly match the parameter name in the method that it's calling. So I'm glad you asked that question. It is critical that those match. If they don't match, then our code is set to just keep the user back on the same page. Does that help answer your question? Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. It's an important. Plus, we get to see how the debugger works. Okay, everyone, I will stay in the room for a little bit if anybody needs help. If everything's working for you or you have no questions, then I'll see you next week. How would you describe David, Microsoft has a name for it. It's called Razor syntax. So that's what Microsoft calls its view syntax, which is a combination of HTML and then using the @ symbol to denote server-side code. The CS/HTML is the extension, but the actual name of the syntax is Razor. So that's why when we created a view, right, it gave us the option Razor view empty or regular Razor view, meaning this is the syntax we use. Great question. So if we are done for today. You're free to go. I hope you enjoyed the class. All the code is on GitHub. I'll upload the videos in a little while. Have an excellent weekend. Make sure you take care of those 3 small assignments. Ralph, yeah, we can have a look. And Kathleen, I think I already offered if you wanted me. Thanks, Jennifer. Have a good week. Kathleen, if you wanted me to look at yours, then we can do that. You fixed it? Okay, excellent. Good to hear. Okay.